Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities. The Report. Published March 2021. The Commissioners: Dr. Tony Sewell, CBE, Dr. Maggie Alderin-Pocock, MBE, Aftab Chugtai, MBE, Keith Fraser, Noreen Khalid, Dr. Dambiza Moyo, Mercy Maroki, Martin Oliver, Dr. Samuel Shah, CBE. Co-opted members: Kunal Alode, MBE, Blondell Clough, CBE. Forward from the Chair. Last summer, the Prime Minister asked if I would be willing to chair a commission to investigate race and ethnic disparities in the UK. He felt that the UK needed to consider important questions about the state of race relations today, and that there needed to be a thorough examination of why so many disparities persist. We needed to work out what can be done to eliminate or to mitigate them. I readily agreed. I've spent all my working life as an educationalist dedicated to this cause. The Commission was established with 10 of us, drawn from a variety of fields spanning science, education, economics, broadcasting, medicine, and policing, and with one exception, all from ethnic minority backgrounds. Tasked to look at race and ethnic disparities in education, employment, crime and policing, and health, we first met virtually in July. Like so many of you in your own family and work situations during this time of COVID-19, the Commission has never met face-to-face. Our diverse group, with our different areas of expertise, enabled us to challenge conventional approaches. The debates around the table were invigorating and led us to stimulating discussion. Collectively, over the past few months, we've put our shoulders to the wheel and pushed this endeavour forward. All the while, we've been supported by the Cabinet Office's Race and Disparity Unit, RDU, which was set up in 2016. It has accumulated all the important data on race and ethnicity in one database. For the first time, we've been able to use this dataset to understand the import of ethnicity and other factors on outcomes. That also means, unlike previous reviews focused on particular issues such as workplace or criminal justice, we've been able to look more widely and investigate the deeper underlying causes of key disparities. Sifting through a mass of data, reading the evidence from experts and speaking to communities, we soon realised, given the time constraints or the limitations of available data, we could not address every subject and every issue. We also identified individual ethnic minority groups that have a significant presence and separate identity, though not large enough for their own categories, like Sri Lankan, Somali or East African Asian. We acknowledge the work that has been done on the anti-Muslim prejudice and anti-Semitism, even though it is beyond the scope of this report. The word mistrust was repeated often as some witnesses from the police service, mental health, education and health services felt that the system was not on their side. Once we interrogated the data, we did find some evidence of biases, but often it was a perception that the wider society could not be trusted. For some groups, historic experience of racism still haunts the present, and there was a reluctance to acknowledge that the UK had become open and fairer. The data also revealed many instances of success amongst minority communities. These have often been ignored or have been seen to be of little interest to the media, but we wanted to understand the reasons for the success and whether there were any lessons to be drawn. This is also the first government commissioned study on race that seriously engages with the family. In many areas of investigation, including educational failure and crime, we were led upstream to family breakdown as one of the main reasons for poor outcomes. Family is also the foundation stone of success for many ethnic minorities. Another revelation from our dive into the data was just how stuck some groups from the white majority are. As a result, we came to the view that recommendations should, wherever possible, be designed to remove obstacles for everyone rather than specific groups. It has been quite a journey of discovery. As we met with people in round-table discussions in our versions of the moral maze, and listened to people from all sections of society, We were taken by the distinctions drawn between causes that were external to the individual and those that could be influenced by the actions of the individual himself or herself. As our investigations proceeded, we increasingly felt that an unexplored approach to closing disparity gaps was to examine the extent individuals and their communities could help themselves through their own agency, rather than wait for invisible external forces to assemble to do the job. Poet and activist Linton Kwesi Johnson describes the early black mass presence in the UK as having two phases or eras. The first was the 1950s Windrush arrival from the Caribbean. This he called the heroic period, when literally doors were closed in the faces of new black settlers who heroically battled in the face of adversity. The children of those settlers, my generation, who came of age in the 70s and 80s, he calls the rebel generation. This featured running battles with the police and a breakdown in community relations, which continues to have a negative legacy. The spirit of rebellion continued last summer during the Black Lives Matter protests. This was a revolt that engulfed the world. We have to acknowledge the spirit of BLM was the original trigger for our report. But this report speaks to a new period, which we have described as the era of participation. We can only speak of participation if we acknowledge that the UK has fundamentally shifted since those periods in the past and has become a more open society. We've spoken in this report about how the UK is open to all its communities. But we are acutely aware that the door may only be half open to some, including the white working class. In this regard, we have pointed out how in education, employment, health, and crime and policing, the UK can be more inclusive and a fairer landscape. Participation, however, is not just about opening the doors. We also speak to the need for communities to run through that open space and grasp those opportunities. We have found that some ethnic minorities have been able to participate better than others. We were impressed by the immigrant optimism of some of the new African communities. They are among the new high achievers in our education system. As their Caribbean peers sit in the same classrooms, it is difficult to blame racism in education for the latter's underachievement. The new challenge of participation is best illustrated in the policies that face police recruitment. The police need to demonstrate that they are truly a more welcoming organisation, and black communities need to overcome the legacy of mistrust. We've put forward recommendations that will hopefully bridge this gap. Our findings on black youth homicide are distressing reading, with young black men 24 times more likely to die of homicide than their white counterparts. It is this data that has led us to supporting a reconceptualized idea of stop and search. In health, we need more black and Asian people to participate in health trials, so that medical research will be based on data that comes from the whole population. Our new Office for Health Disparities will be tasked to respond to the specific health and well-being of ethnic groups. The Making of Modern Britain teaching resource is our response to negative calls for decolonising the curriculum. Neither the banning of white authors or token expressions of black achievement will help to broaden young minds. We have argued against bringing down statues. Instead, we want all children to reclaim their British heritage. We want to create a teaching resource that looks at the influence of the UK, particularly during the Empire period. We want to see how Britishness influenced the Commonwealth and local communities, and how the Commonwealth and local communities influenced what we now know as modern Britain. One great example would be a dictionary or lexicon of well-known British words which are Indian in origin. There is a new story about the Caribbean experience which speaks to the slave period not only being about profit and suffering, but how culturally African people transformed themselves into a remodelled African Britain. I wanted to call one of the chapters The End of BAME, Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic. The term BAME community feels like a group that is held together by no more than what it is not. The commissioners were not impressed by those companies that pointed to their unconscious bias training as proof of their progressive credentials. We were impressed by more conscious attempts to foster talent from a wide range of backgrounds. Put simply, We no longer see a Britain where the system is deliberately rigged against ethnic minorities. The impediments and disparities do exist. They are varied, and ironically, very few of them are directly to do with racism. Too often, racism is the catch-all explanation and can be simply implicitly accepted rather than explicitly examined. The evidence shows that geography, family influence, socio-economic background, culture, and religion have more significant impact on life chances than the existence of racism. That said, we take the reality of racism seriously, and we do not deny that it is a real force in the UK. The Commission was keen to gain a more forensic and rigorous understanding of underlying causes of disparities. However, we have argued for the use of the term institutional racism to be applied only when deep-seated racism can be proven on a systemic level, and not to be used as a general catch-all phrase for any microaggression, witting or unwitting. The purpose of this report is to provide the UK with a roadmap for racial fairness. There are still real obstacles, and there are also practical ways to surmount them. But that becomes much harder if people from ethnic minority backgrounds absorb a fatalistic narrative that says the deck is permanently stacked against them. Armed with the rich data from the RDU, we have aimed to dispel some myths and reach a more nuanced view. Creating a successful multicultural society is hard, and racial disparities exist wherever such a society is being forged. The Commission believes that if these recommendations are implemented, it will give a further burst of momentum to the story of our country's progress to a successful multicultural community, a beacon to the rest of Europe and to the world.